It's May 18th, and this is another in our series of interviews about the International Energy Agency's Net Zero by 2050 report that came out today. And I'm going to be talking to Danielle Fugere, who is a head of As You Sow, a nonprofit shareholder advocacy group based out of Oakland, California. So welcome to the interview, Danielle.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Now, I understand, you work with investors all over the world and some of the big companies. And what are their expectations around net zero emissions by 2050?
Investors, especially large investors, pension funds, those who have longer term interests and beneficiaries, are very interested in addressing the climate change problem. Not only because there's risk to companies, but because of risk to portfolios. So if in an economy that has massive catastrophes, fires, droughts, it's very difficult to make money. It's difficult to control portfolios, and the entire economy is shrinking or will shrink as this occurs. So we are very interested in seeing climate change addressed and net zero being all companies transitioning to net zero.
Well, let's speak about fossil fuel companies because in your press release, you talked about some of the things they need to do, such as set net zero targets, develop a clear transition strategy. Are you talking to oil, gas, and coal companies?
Absolutely. Primarily oil and gas companies. Coal is and has been on the way out. I think that in terms of especially U.S. companies, those are the companies that we work with. We have been working to transition oil and gas companies to either move into new energy sources such as renewables. Another alternative is that they shrink to grow. So they, if you look at what the IEA has projected, the amount of fossil fuels has to decline rapidly, and there's no new investment needed in new discoveries. So in essence, what we're saying is that yes, you've got to have a plan. It can be whatever your plan is. Maybe you're going to work on platforms out in the ocean because that's what you're good at. But tell us what it is, what your plan is. You need to have a plan, and we need to know, be able to compare that to other companies like Shell and BP and Total. So we're seeing European companies change.
Well, now I happen to interview a lot of U.S. oil and gas companies, and my impression would be, based on those interviews, that your message might not always be well received. Would that be accurate?
I would say that U.S. oil and gas companies, unlike European counterparts, because they haven't been challenged by government, they have been less inclined to change the way they do business. So they will tell us that demand will continue to increase for fossil fuels and that they are smart enough to make money. What that doesn't address is the impact that their continued actions have on climate. So that's an important part of our concern. But we also believe that, and as the net zero scenario demonstrates, there is going to be change. There will be transition, and companies who are prepared for it will be better off. And certainly, we just saw banks also set net zero targets. The global financial system is moving in that way, so the cost of capital will increase dramatically. And I think that has to be reflected in company actions.
Now, access to capital and cost of capital are really important considerations these days for oil and gas companies, particularly medium and small ones. And is that what your conversations reflect, that whatever they think about climate change, if you charge them more for money or make it more difficult to get money, that tends to get their attention?
It has to. None of these, all of these companies are dependent on capital. And if capital is not available or if it costs more, they will be less competitive. That's just the way the market works, and appropriately so. That's the capitalist system. So it's a change. And if a bank is heading to net zero in all of its financed emissions, that means that the companies that are its clients have to be heading in that direction, or they will be at the short end of the capital stick.
Now, You mentioned in the press release that standing in the way of progress is no longer acceptable for companies, their own enterprise success. What do you mean by that?
That the world is changing around them. And we've seen examples in history where companies don't recognize change as it's coming. They don't prepare for it, and therefore they become non-viable. And so two things: to stand in the way to lobby against climate policy. Investors are very strongly standing up and saying that's not appropriate. So we will not continue to fund companies that are lobbying against appropriate climate change. And also that those companies will be left behind. If the world is changing around them, if energy market is going to net zero, companies have to change.
Danielle, thank you very much for this. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you. Bye.